You'll excuse me if I occasionally refer to my notes. Somebody asked me 2 weeks ago at Fort Worth whether I was nervous about giving speeches at this stage. And my honest reply was not about stuttering. That doesn't faze me. I don't do it very often. If I do, I really don't care. My concern is getting up here and absolutely going blank and asking you to talk amongst yourselves. You know, I tried to think about what on earth I could say to you again at high school, on the high school level, kind of a little late. I had several speech therapists that didn't seem to be particularly helpful until at last there was one who I found was very helpful because she was really cute. And that helps. You know, love and support and friendship, I think, ultimately are far greater tools than expertise in mechanical exercises. I was now 16, and this is the experience that, by the way, led to the scene in the King's Speech that got us the R rating and put us in the same ballpark as Chainsaw in 3D. In a country, by the way, where you, on the radio and television, can advertise a film called Little Fockers. The hormones were raging at 16, of course. I couldn't ask the girl out for a date. And even if I had asked her for a date, and even if she had said yes, what was the point? I couldn't talk to her. And this was the 50s, and we did talk on dates. So I got very upset, quite depressed for a little while, but I'm not a particularly depressive personality. It's just my DNA. I get very defiant and proactive. And I ended up thinking, this is wrong. There's something wrong in this picture. And I found myself in my bedroom thinking, now wait, what have I done wrong? Why have the gods visited this affliction upon me? I didn't sleep with my mother, I didn't kill my father. I'm a pretty good kid. So, and I started shouting the F word, the F-bomb word. Well, if I am stuck with this F-word affliction, F-word the rest of you, you are just F-word stuck with listening to me. By the way, I don't encourage you to walk up and down the aisles of the hotel screaming this word. That seemed to be the trigger inside my head. Flipped a switch. Something changed. That act of defiance, that, all right, if this is my lot in life, I accept it, but everyone else is going to have to accept it too. And within 2 weeks, my stuttering just miraculously faded away. I realized day by day, oh, I'm stuttering less. Oh, I'm not stuttering at all. I can't say that it totally vanished. I still had great trouble with conjugating French verbs. And I couldn't read. Reading aloud was still pretty difficult for me, but speech was fine, or pretty much fine. So much so that I auditioned for the school play, and I even got a role. It was a very small role. It was in George Bernard Shaw's Androcles and the Lion, and I was a Christian being eaten by a lion in the Colosseum, but I didn't stutter as I died. That intelligent, that charismatic, that good-looking, that talented, and that nice too. It's just unfair. I keep on asking Colin to do something dastardly, but he won't. Anyway, he wanted to work very closely with me. He said, look, you're my sauce. You wrote your story using the king, obviously, but it's your story. Tell me what it was like. I had to telling not only how it felt physically, what happens to the shoulders, what happens to the chest muscles, how the stomach feels, how the jaw type, all the stuff that you all know about. But he then, after learning all of that, he wanted to know psychologically what it felt like, the sense of isolation, the sense of loneliness, the sense of frustration. The fact that, of course, contrary to the folk myth, we are not really feeble-minded. You see, we can think as fast, if not faster, than most people. We just have some problems articulating it. So I was really able to once again think about this. And so now we come to the second part of my journey through stuttering, which was trying to make some sense out of what the journey of getting fluency had been all about. And I started thinking back, and I thought, all right, what happened in that very difficult third year of my life? And I understood that the common theme there was that my opinion was not being asked. I was not being heard. I was screaming out, if not actually, certainly internally, where has Adelaide gone? Why am I on a boat? What's happening? And I wasn't getting any answers, and therefore I was doubting the fact that I actually had a voice. This is just my case. It may be different for many people, but that's the way I thought about that experience. The cop story in Seidler. I realized that this was a thread that ran throughout my life. If you are born with two conflicting elements to your personality, on one hand you're a real ham bone and you want attention, and on the other hand you're a stutterer and can't get it verbally, you're in a bit of a conundrum. And I think that explains why so many stutterers become writers, or why so many writers are indeed stutterers, going all the way back to Aesop, and you have some very, very famous people, Somerset Maugham. I thought that's kind of interesting. I thought about therapy, and the good therapy and bad therapy. I've got to say that I think the type of speech therapy that's going on in this country has improved considerably, and it is not just mechanics. I found, again, I'm just speaking a survey of one here, mechanics certainly did not give me any degree of fluency, but once I had a degree of fluency, the mechanics, the exercises became extremely valuable tools. I'm still a stutterer today. I don't know how many of you hear it, whether your ears are finely attuned enough, but I'm stuttering fairly often, except I know when it's coming. And without even thinking, I'm so used to using these techniques that I take the breath, or I use the slide, or all the stuff that you've been taught. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And then the act of defiance when I was 16. What was that all about? I mean, there are so many theories now as to what causes stuttering. Is it DNA? Is it hereditary? Well, there's no question that it does run in some families. One of my uncles was a stutterer. My grandfather was a stutterer. We know this for a fact. Is it neurological? Well, it may or may not be, but then how does one explain the sudden improvement that I had and that other people had had? I'm not the only one. I've heard this story many, many times. Did our chromosomes suddenly change in 2 weeks? Did our synapses suddenly change? How do these things happen? And in a certain sense, I came to the conclusion that it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I recall years ago there was a period when I lived in the South Pacific, and I became fascinated, even obsessed, with the question of where did the Polynesians come from? And there are many theories, and probably most of the theories are right, and it was a combination. But I became absolutely obsessed with this, and there was a period when I was in Tonga, the Kingdom of Tonga, and there was a Maori from New Zealand there who I became friendly with. And I would talk to him incessantly and ask him questions. Finally, one night, he really had enough of this. He said, David, he said, mate, I don't care where we came from. All I'm interested is where we're going. And so it is with stuttering, I think. It's somewhat like eels. You know, eels are wonderfully mysterious creatures. Nobody knows actually how they breed or where they, it has never been seen in all the hundreds and thousands of years that man has been fishing for eels and eating eels. No one has ever seen it, yet obviously it takes place. Who cares? Was the ability to know a little bit about what not to do. Both of my children, and they're from two different mothers, both absolutely on schedule, about 3.5, began to stutter a little bit. And I knew what not to do. And I knew that the best thing I could do was to simply listen. Without any frantic look in my eyes, without any patience, without any twitching my hands, just listen. And it went away. May I say that if it doesn't go away, getting good therapeutic help is really advisable. There are things that sustain one throughout life. One of the things that sustained me early on in my life was in my South Pacific Fiji days, I had decided, for some obscure reason, to be the first person in modern times to sail a Fijian outrigger canoe. These things are about 36 feet long. They're big canoes. And they used to sail from island group to island group majestically, but the British had put them out of business, had made it illegal because they wanted to force the locals into a cash economy. But I discovered that there was a very remote island in the south part of Fiji that still had and made these and used these canoes. So I went down there and I rented a canoe, you know, Hertz Rent-A-Canoe. Actually, it was 3 days of wonderful negotiations of how many arm lengths of printed cloth and how many lengths of rope tobacco and how many files for sharpening machetes. But anyway, to make a long story short, I actually succeeded with my Fijian crew of sailing the length of Fiji in an outrigger canoe. And this sustained me for many years. When I got into very tough times, I thought, hey, I'm the man who sailed the Fiji group, I can do anything. Until ultimately I realized, no, actually, that wasn't something to rely upon. I had just been extremely lucky. A bit later, well, more recently, which was the trigger for writing the King's Speech, I was diagnosed with what at the time appeared to be an extremely aggressive form of cancer. May I say, that was 6 years ago. I'm in total remission. I'm a poster boy for, you've got to find something else to die of, says my doctor. So I'll find something. But at the time, it was quite a shocking experience. And it left me with a huge gift, that it was a wake-up call. And that it taught me to live every day to the fullest, or as full as I could make it. And to live in the moment. And now came the King's Speech, the film. And the moment came in Toronto. We had a sense that the film might be well received at the film festival in Telluride, but the audiences were very small, and they're a somewhat elite group of film buffs. Toronto was 2,000 people in a huge, huge hall. I was up in the first row of the balcony with Tom Hooper and Colin Firth and Jeffrey Rush and Lena Bonham Carter. people started applauding at the end of the King's speech. The movie wasn't over yet, and they were applauding. And then when it was finally over, 2,000 people just rose and applauded. And if it hit me, I'll probably tear up again just remembering it. I thought, for the first time in my life, my voice has really been heard. And I just started weeping. Tears were coming down, muteness, oh, it was a terrible mess. And they put the spotlights on it. But that was a moment when I really knew, yeah, it could be done. It could be done. Interestingly enough, shortly after, I was besieged with interviews, and life was very, very fraught. Finding time was impossible, and I had an important meeting coming up with Robert Downey Jr., as a matter of fact. And I had not been able to prepare for this meeting and look at my notes. And I finally cleared 45 minutes before having to get in the car to go to this meeting. And the phone rang. And like an idiot, I picked it up. And this voice says, "Hi, this is Joe Biden." And I said, "Come on, don't F-word with me." I thought it was one of my friends being a jerk. And this voice says, "This is Joseph Biden, the Vice President of the United States." Oh, I have heard that voice before. It was Joe Biden, and a very charming and intelligent man who really could talk. I couldn't get him off the phone for 45 minutes. But he said two things. He said a lot of things that should and will remain private. But he said two things that I would like to share with you. He obviously thought about this issue a great deal. He said, "You realize, David, stuttering is the only disability that it's still, in the public mind, okay to tease about. You know, we don't tease people with white canes. We don't tease people with a limb missing. We don't tease people who can't hear. But if you stutter, out come the Porky Pig stories." And I thought, yeah, that's really sadly true. He also, very movingly, shared his sense of guilt that when he got a handle on his stutter, that he really went into the closet. I mean, I admitted that I just didn't want to think about it. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want anyone to know, because he felt it would harm his political career. That the old folk myth of, if you stutter, you're kind of slow, kind of feeble-minded, would ruin his chances in politics. And it was only recently that he's sort of come out of the closet and is willing to talk about it. And he felt badly, and I was extremely moved by that. When you win an Academy Award, all sorts of strange things happen. People come out of the woodwork, you know. Old girlfriends. "Oh, David, I've always adored you." "Then why didn't you answer my phone calls?" But old high school friends contacted me, and what I found so interesting, and which I think you will find encouraging, is that most of them said, "Gee, I don't even remember that you stuttered that much. You know, yeah, you were kind of a little nervous, but I don't remember that you were." That isn't what they remembered. And I thought, I could hardly believe that. It was stunning to me. He said, "David, I want to shake your hands. I want to tell you I only came here to see you and to say thank you." I was a little bit bewildered. I said, "What, did I lend you $20?" He said, "No, we were in remedial speech together. Do you remember?" And I looked at his face, and yes, it slowly came back. I remembered the man. We had been in remedial speech together. And he said, "You were a great example to me." And I thought he meant, oh, it was because I had gotten a handle on it and I had auditioned for the school play and been in the school play. He said, no, not at all. That wasn't it at all. And I was quite mystified. He said, don't you remember, long before you got a handle on your stuttering, when your stuttering was really at its worst, you had decided to run for student council. And the rules of our high school were, anyone who ran for student office had to give a 5-minute campaign speech at the assembly of the entire school. And there were no exceptions.